Okay, everyone, thanks for joining us today here at the University Library to learn more about the really exciting topic of referencing. I joke, but referencing is something that is required for every assignment you will do here at the university during the course of your degree, and integrity lasts beyond your degree as well. And I'm sure you're on that part of semester now where your big assignments are due. You might be getting a bit stressed if you don't have that much experience with referencing before. So that's what we're here today to help you with. So my name is Rachel. I'm an academic support librarian here at the University Library. First up, we'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Kaurna people, and pay respect to their elders past and present. And I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today as well. We're here today to discover what is referencing and why you should do it. Well, basically, referencing is a process of acknowledging your sources, as the slide suggests. That's any kind of source you use in an assignment. You can see some on the screen here. So, journal articles, books, but also speeches, diagrams, more of those non-traditional sources as well. Basically, you're acknowledging the thoughts and ideas of the people who've written the resources that you're using in your work and making sure your work's clear of plagiarism, and it can really demonstrate the research field, the key authors in the field, the breadth of research you've done, and the time spent on your assignment. So basically, it's an important requirement for good academic work and academic practice, even back to the beginning of your degree. And you really need to be transparent about where you're getting your information from. And more important these days, with the world of AI, that is ever growing, and of those issues about transparency and where research comes from and who's authoring things like that as well. So basically, what I'll do just to start with, before we go on, is I'm just going to take you through some of the referencing support resources the library has available for you. So on the library homepage of the University Library here, you just have to scroll down to referencing support. So our online resources provide a more detailed explanation of what referencing is. For those of you using Harvard U of A style, which would be quite a few of you, it's kind of the main referencing style of the university. We have an interactive guide for you to look through, and we also have resources on quite a few other of the main styles as well. So I'm just going to first draw your attention here to our frequently asked questions about referencing. This page covers the reasons why you need to reference and also how to reference. Without going into the specifics of the style, just to get you a bit of an idea of the practice more generally. I think one of the key things you want to know when you're starting out with referencing, especially as an undergraduate, is knowing when to reference. So you can see here it asks you questions you should ask yourself of when you're writing an assignment or research piece. For example, how do I know when to reference? Here we go. So for example, is it a work I've used? Have I quoted a word, or am I paraphrasing? All the instances when you need to think about referencing or when you don't. We'll go into this a bit more detail later in the session. But basically, just going through these FAQs is a really good way to get acquainted with the ideas of referencing. And also under this section here about how do I know when to reference, you can also try interactive activity for more information, to kind of prompting you to ask those questions when you're doing your assignment, and when it comes time for you to create a reference list as well. Like I said, I'll have a slide later on that goes through the process in the more detail. But basically, yes, just check out our referencing FAQs and resources there. They're your first point of call if you need help, and then obviously you can come and ask one of the library team. But basically, kind of every question you want to know about referencing, it would be on this page here. Okay. So it's just a reinforcement basically of the brief mentions I gave about why you should reference. Basically, number one, why you should reference is to avoid plagiarism. Sometimes it's incidental. Not all plagiarism is on purpose. We don't think students are out there trying to cheat on purpose, but sometimes it can be incidental if you're not used to kind of doing a really long project and you've taken notes from lots of different resources, and you've kind of compiled notes and you're using those notes to write an essay. Sometimes inadvertent plagiarism can be an issue, so it's just kind of being on top of the way you're kind of going around that. Basically, to also make sure you're well informed and support any claims that you make. You just don't want to be making assumptions out of thin air without any evidence to back them up. Providing verifiable details. So basically, this point means if your course coordinator is reading your assignment and it's like, oh, that looks like a really good resource that person's used, and they might want to go and read the same book or read the same article, then that person would want your referencing to be so transparent and accurate that they could go and look for that book or article just based on reading your assignment and the reference you've put in. And find the same reference or resource themselves. And most importantly, finally, is to acknowledge the work of others. There's so much hard work gone into academic literature and research, and finding out these things, you really want to be respectful and mindful of the work of people that have gone before you as well. So in referencing, there's two kinds of concepts, and that is the referencing format and the referencing style. So format refers to whether you basically have in-text citations or footnotes. Footnotes are usually numbered so you can tell which citation is a part and will appear at the bottom of the page. So basically you have a sentence with a tiny little 1 or 2 at the end of it or whatever number. And then at the bottom of the page, footnotes. So in the footer of the page, it'll have the long reference or whatever resource it is. Whereas in-text citations appear as brackets in text, so in the actual paragraphs at the end of a sentence. Whether you have a reference list or bibliography depends on the style and purpose of whatever it is you're researching or writing, but they're very similar. They are the same principle. It's just providing a shortened version in text and a longer version at the end. I'll go over the difference a bit more in a little bit. So what syntax and punctuation you use is also part of the referencing format. So for example, one type of referencing style might require you to italicize the journal name for articles. Titles might appear in quotation marks in one style, but not in another style. So these little nitty-gritty kind of things in referencing are what you really have to pay attention to. They might sound annoying. And I've done assignments when I was at university, like, oh, you haven't used a comma in this reference. And putting it out, you're like, oh, it's so annoying. But really having that consistency, that visual consistency in a reference list makes it a lot easier for your marker to read. And it's just good practice. So format goes hand in hand with referencing style, which are basically the standardized set of conventions. Some have unusual names. Once I read up on the origin of all the referencing style names, like why is it called Harvard? Why is it called Chicago? Is it from Chicago? Very boring. Obviously a bit of a library nerd, but they're the names. If you want to look them up, you can Google them yourself. We have guides for almost all of them listed on the slide as the main ones. So Harvard, APA7, Chicago, and Vancouver, different styles that are used in different disciplines. There's also a separate referencing style for law called aGLC for law and legal materials. That's best practice if you want to cite laws. So basically, these referencing styles can be described as a guidebook or instruction book for how to format references in that particular style. As to how to format a reference in Harvard or APA, etc. Obviously, you can get them as ebooks or websites as well, not just physical books, but a guidebook, you understand my meaning. Okay, so this page here is an example of a referencing style in Harvard style, and that's Harvard U of A. So Harvard's quite an interesting style in that it's not the same everywhere, so it's based off like a government's referencing style manual, but each university has kind of adapted the style in its own way. So at the University of Adelaide, it's called Harvard U of A, funnily enough. So you can see here we have highlighted in yellow its use of in-text citations. So that's basically putting the surname and year of the publication or whatever resource you're using in the brackets at the end of a sentence. And then you can see the name, the same reference in the reference list, the long version. So you always have a short version, a long version. That's the same in kind of every referencing style you use. So whenever you're doing an assignment, you'll kind of always mention a reference twice, shortened in text or in a footnote or longer at the end. And the one at the end always gives all information about the resource that they've used. So you can see just the name and year, and then here you have all the information. So this is the same thing, but we're just showing an example of APA 7. You can see a few little differences. You can see they've just put a comma in between the surname and the year in the in-text reference. So again, little things like that you just have to pay attention to between the styles. And you can see here in the reference list there are a few differences as well. Like APA 7 likes you to hyperlink to the online link where you found the article or ebook or whatever. And the other little changes in there as well, like placements of commas and full stops, and also the indentation here. Again, small things, but it's really, you have to be aware of them basically. You can see with these examples I've showed you here, they make it really, really clear. You can clearly see where the information's from. You could clearly go and look up that citation yourself. It's a bit different. Chicago is a style that uses footnotes. It's quite commonly used in humanities. You can see we've got our little one there highlighted in yellow. Then you can see the same references in the full footnotes underneath. And also with footnotes, you can also use them to add contextual information. So like if you want to expand on a little point, you can add that into a footnote and then put the reference. So here you might just put an explanatory sentence and then start the footnote there. That's permitted. Some course coordinators have that count in the word limit of your assignments and some don't. So it's always good to check with them. But basically, like I said, having that consistent formatting in your referencing is really important. And you can see here, if this first one was formatted one way and the second one was formatted a different way, it would be a bit harder to read. And finally, you can see the same source formatted in Vancouver, which is a style that has very little information in text. It literally just has the number. And in the reference list, they order the reference list numerically. So the order that the references appear in the text rather than alphabetically, which is the way that most other styles reference things in the reference list. So opinions, anyone have any hard opinions on that? But the valid way to order your references, I guess. Basically, like I said, I think Vancouver's commonly used in vet sciences. It depends. You really have to check with your course coordinator as well. So I just kind of want to show you a cheat way. If you're like, oh, how am I going to stay on top of formatting all these references and remembering what to do, especially in the case that maybe you're doing 2 classes or you're doing an elective and they want you to use different referencing style to your other class and you're like, oh, I've got to kind of learn 2 referencing styles at once. To speed up the process a bit, if it's a bit daunting, if you use library search and not Google, there's a benefit to that. So basically, if you find a reference in library search and you go to the landing page and you click on citation, it will automatically generate a reference list entry for those Harvard, APA, MLA, and Vancouver. It's always good to double check, and then you can copy the citation to clipboard and then copy and paste it into your assignment. So that's a cheat way. It's very helpful. I hope you use it. But basically, it is good practice to double check the style guide on our website to make sure the format's correct, because library catalog is automatically generated. It's no humans generating it for you. So it's a quicker way, but also just with that, proviso. Double check, especially if you really want, especially if there's marks in your assignment for getting correct referencing as well. So next up, I'm just going to move back to focusing on when you need to reference, because this is a big question people always have. So every time you mention an idea or quote words from another work in your assignment, you do need to reference. It can get a little bit confusing in practice. Sometimes you can be unsure. You'll eventually work out your own kind of personal writing style as your degree goes on, so you'll kind of get more of a natural feeling for it. But personally, I like to directly reference a source at the beginning of like my point or within a sentence. So for example, you might say like Smith 2020 found that the sky is blue at this time of day, and then put a reference. So you can do it both ways. Kind of what I'm trying to say is I get this question a lot in that this style says you should put all the information in brackets at the end of a sentence. But basically, if you're directly quoting words or, and this is for styles that don't have footnotes, but if you're directly quoting words or the point you're making is directly about an argument that an author has made, it's great to kind of put, like say, Smith and then in brackets 2020 states this particular thing, and then you can put the page number at the end if the in-text citation requires a page number, just to really front and center that you're getting this specific argument from an audience, a specific argument from an author rather. So there is kind of 2 ways you can do it, and our Harvard U of A guide gives examples of both ways as well. So basically, with that said, these are some of the questions you can ask yourself about when you do need to reference. So if the words are your own, yes, then you do not need to reference because you thought of the word yourself. Are the words not your own, then like I just said, provide in-text citation and add the full details of the work to your reference list. And then we have words. Words is a bit easier. Like if you're directly quoting something, then common sense says, yes, you need to provide a reference. But sometimes you might not be directly quoting words from somewhere, but you're wanting an idea, and it can get a bit more hazy. Basically, if the idea is your own, you've come up with your own argument out of your brain or from a lot of reading, and you can't pinpoint an exact place you've got it from, then you do not need to reference. If the idea is not your own, you then need to ask yourself, is the idea common knowledge? So an example of something that's common knowledge is Adelaide is the capital of South Australia. You don't need to reference that. Everybody knows, or they should know, or that kind of thing. If the idea is not common knowledge, you then need to ask yourself, did you think of it yourself? Are you paraphrasing someone else's idea? Obviously, if you thought it yourself, you're doing great. You're generating lots of ideas based on the research you've read, but forming your own conclusions, that's excellent. So if it's something that you've thought of yourself in any situation, you do not need to reference. So if you are writing an essay and your essay should have an argument, which you probably state at the beginning of your first paragraph, you don't need to reference your argument, it's your argument. But if it's someone else's idea, then again, you need to provide an in-text citation and add full details of your work to the reference list. Okay, so moving on to our referencing style guides, I briefly looked on the webpage before, but I'm going to go into a bit more detail. I just want to show you guys quickly in a minute our interactive Harvard U of A guide. Basically, this tool has been built by some of our colleagues in another team, but it's run by the library. And basically, you can select or choose from the types of resources you might want to reference with Harvard U of A. And we've made this tool because Harvard U of A is the most widely used referencing style at the university. So basically, I'll just show you that quickly. Just go back here onto our referencing support page. This is opening up. Obviously, if you're more traditional or you want to print the guide, download it, keep it on your desk or whatever, there is a PDF version downloaded here, but just bear in mind that if we update this, the version you printed is not going to be updated and you're not going to know. But basically, we've got this first section. You can just talk about what Harvard U of A is, how to use the guide, and then like a general example. And then if you use them on the left here, we've also got FAQs as well, for some nitty-gritty kind of referencing questions, like when you have a work and it's got like 20 authors, what do I do? Do I have to list all of them? All the information for those kind of trickier referencing questions are available in the FAQs here. And then also from here, you can pick the type of research you're wanting to reference, like data sets. For some reason, you might be doing that, social media posts, other referencing types. We've also got how to reference artificially in generated content as well. Basically, every kind of resource you could think of you can find here. And then if you just press that again, in the third section here, it will give you examples of the layout, an example, and an example in text as well, and then notes and any exceptions that you have to be aware of. But just some quick proviso about our reference list versing and bibliography. There is a bit of a difference between the two of them. So reference list only includes sources referred to in your work versus the bibliography that may include extra sources you don't reference directly in your work, but were very helpful for you while you were researching. I just mentioned this, you don't really probably have to think about this a lot, but basically course coordinators and lecturers can use these two words interchangeably. So it's always good to check with them exactly what they mean, because there is a little bit of a difference really if you look up the definition. So they're fundamentally the same function. It's just that your course coordinator or supervisor may want you to list everything you've read rather than what you just end up directly citing in your essay. And inevitable, especially when you do a longer assignment, you'll probably read more than what you eventually put in the reference list. So it's just that difference to be aware of. And our main thing is if in doubt, ask your course coordinator. They're the ones that really kind of set standards for this as well. Moving on quickly to the new frontier of referencing, just before we wrap up, which is acknowledging the use of AI tools in research and assignments. So first up, like I said, check with your course coordinator again with this too. Some courses allow you to use tools like ChatGPT and Copilot to do your assignments, brainstorm ideas, formulate research questions, that kind of thing, and some don't. So don't take our word for it. You have to ask your course coordinator firstly if you're allowed to. And then if you are, you can come to us about how to reference them. So in terms of references, some referencing styles have guidelines about how to reference AI material and some don't. You may have to adapt references using a different format for the resource. So some say use format AI citations the same as you would for personal or electronic correspondence. But again, please check. So there are two parts of referencing AI regardless of style. Basically, you'll have the reference in text and reference list, and then you also have to have an acknowledgement. So it depends on what your course coordinator actually wants. They might provide some set text that they want you to use, but generally you have to acknowledge and express in your assignment exactly how you use the AI tool. So you can see us in this example on the screen, which has a little blurb that says, I acknowledge the use of ChatGPT to generate ideas and material for background research and project planning in this assignment, and then the following prompts, and then you provide the prompt that you used. So basically, you just have to be extra transparent. It's the best practice in this space to put this extra effort in, because ChatGPT and other AI tools don't have much transparency in how they generate their content, and it's a bit of concern about how it's being used. So you really make it clear over and above other resources you've used about how you've actually generated the content. So basically when, just to go into a bit more detail, it's just the academic integrity issues. We encourage, or depending on your course coordinator, but basically you encourage kind of experimentation, the best ways to kind of use these sources, but really you have to have detailed citations because of those blurred lines of authorship as well. Moving on to acknowledging AI generated images, similar but different. It might be quite common if you're doing a PowerPoint or presentation, you might want to include a generated AI image because you simply can't find image that already exists that meets your needs. This is just an example of an image created with Microsoft Copilot. Creative mode, so basically you're saying what tool you used to make it and then what prompt you used as well. For more information, I'm actually just going to show you, go back to our referencing page, more style guides. So just to point out before these is where you'll find the other referencing style guides as well. But I want to point out artificial intelligence here. So this takes us to our AI. How do I guide? And if you go to the tab Citing and Acknowledging AI, gives a bit more of an explanation about why you should do it and the general guidelines. And then you see we have here examples of all from the different referencing styles about how to cite tools, AI tools using that as well. So this would be your easiest port of call, but having to go through the guide step by step to find out if you are using AI and any of these styles here. How to reference them. So you might want to bookmark this page if that's what you're doing. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. Cool. So to summarize, we're at the end. To summarize, we've gone through the importance of referencing the different formats and styles and how to reference and attribute AI. This was a bit of a crash course. There's a lot more detail we could go into, but I just wanted to give you a bit of a taste of this space and the different resources we have on offer to help you with referencing. If you have any questions about referencing, pop them in the chat now, or you can contact us library for assistance. There's a link on our referencing support page that I just showed you. But if you go to the library homepage, there's an Ask Library link, and they're your first point of call for any referencing queries. There's also an online chat if you have a referencing question and you don't want to talk to anyone in person as well. So in our series, we kind of have 3 sessions left. One's a repeat. Now it's near the end of semester. So next week, if you want a bit of a follow-up from this week, we're going to be doing a webinar on managing your references using EndNote. So that's a referencing software that you can download. My colleague Lila will be taking that one. And basically, yeah, it's kind of a software. You may use it when you go into honours. Your course coordinator may recommend it if you're going to be using a lot of resources. So please tune in for that one. And then the following week and the week after, we're going to be doing our Ask a Librarian series where you can drop in and ask us any questions that you want to on anything. We'll be happy to answer them as well. So we're looking forward to that. And the QR code on the screen, you can get your staff for a Zoom link as well. So I really hope you continue turning up to our last 3 in our webinar series. Learn something from them. Hope you have a great day, and thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you so much, everyone.